Hello, everyone. My name is Angeline Chen, and I'm the president of the board of directors of the YWCA Pasadena. Welcome to our live webinar on how blockchain is changing the world as we know it. I would like to thank our sponsors today, Clark Hill PLC, Andrade Gonzalez LLP, Corpavera Lee and Dominguez LLP. This event supports our YWCA Pasadena and Glendale's Tech Girls program, where we empower young girls in the areas of STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We are teaching coding, robotics, and cool projects like making wearables. We also have a mentorship program with Caltech students. All proceeds from this event goes directly to these programs. You will see a donate now button on your screen that you can click on. And also there is a text to donate option where you can text YW blockchain to 41411. This event will be recorded and posted on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can find us at YWCA Pasadena. Please share it for your friends. I would like to introduce and thank our esteemed panelists for today. Leslie Katz is a partner at Clark Hill PLC. She focuses on government law and policy and regularly interacts with state agencies. Her ability to provide strategic counsel for startups to Fortune 500 companies and public entities comes from her diverse experiences in the public and private sectors. She regularly speaks on blockchain, regulatory matters, public policy topics, and on infrastructure, economic development, community relations, leadership development, and technology-related issues. Jor Law is a pioneer in building out the ecosystem for digitizing and trading securities on the blockchain and other distributed ledger technologies. A finance and securities attorney, he is most well known for his expertise in secured lending and alternative finance, including EB5, venture capital, crowdfunding, and tokenized securities, including initial coin offerings or security token offerings. He co-founded VerifyInvestor.com, which was a dominant accredited investor verification service in the world at the time it was acquired. He is a trusted consultant advisor to technology companies, primarily in RegTech, FinTech, and crypto. Gary Leland is a businessman, entrepreneur, and media personality. He produces several shows in the cryptocurrency sphere, including the Crypto Cousins podcast, the 4-Minute Crypto Show, the What is Bitcoin podcast, the Railroaded podcast, and the BitBlock Boom podcast. He also founded the BitBlock Boom Bitcoin Conference in Dallas, Texas in 2018. In 2019, Gary became an advisor and part owner of GiveBitcoin.io and SwanBitcoin.com, which allow users to buy and invest Bitcoin. Ruby Ronruan is a senior producer at Lucid Sight Inc., a Los Angeles-based software company that develops blockchain games and game technology. She is a UCLA graduate and is a producer for their title CSC, which is a casual space MMO, massively multiplayer online game with fast-paced combat, a robust player economy, and an uncapped crafting system. CSC allows users to command starships and earn digital items to buy, sell, or trade without limits, both inside and outside of the game universe. Thank you, panelists, for spending your time with us and sharing your expertise. Okay, let's get into the program. I will be asking questions to the panelists. At the end, we will leave time for Q&A. At any point, you can type a question in the comment box on the screen and it will get to me. I can ask the questions to our panelists at the end. We're going to start with Jor Law. Jor, what is the difference between blockchain, cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin? And you have 30 seconds. Just kidding. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think before we get into each of those, it's important to understand kind of the concept of a ledger and then a distributed ledger, in following on from their distributed ledger technology. So let's take an example, right? For example, when you get two people to pool their money and pay for lunch, you and I will get together and we're always going out. Instead of us splitting the bill each time, we just decide that we're going to pool our money and pay for lunch, right? Well, we got to keep track of that, right? So each time we go out and we eat dinner or lunch, one of us pulls out a piece of paper and we start logging down. Hey, today's date, we spent this much, remaining funds so much, right? That, if you think about it, is a form of a ledger, right? It's just some method of tracking accounting. Um, Now, this concept of distributed ledger is just the concept that multiple people keep the books so that you don't have to rely on just one party to keep it, right? So it's a little bit safer and more accurate if each time we both go to lunch, we both jot down how much we spent and how much is left over, so that if for some reason I made a mistake, you've got it right. If you've made a mistake, I've got it right. Or if you don't trust me, you have your own record, right? So imagine this concept times many, many people, right? So this idea that you could have this ledger that many people would keep, there's more safety in case a book gets lost, and there's more trust that the books are kept accurately because everyone is keeping track, right? So that's a concept, that's an analogy for how distributed ledgers work. And distributed ledger technology is just technology that implements this concept. Now, if you go back to the lunch ledger example, right? Let's say they're keeping track of the accounting on a sheet of paper. Well, imagine that that piece of paper is a block, right? And on one sheet of paper, you can only log so many transactions. But when it's full, you got to turn to the next sheet of paper, right? You got to turn the page. That's similar to blockchain, right? The transactions get recorded on a block. When a block fills up effectively and it's full, you move to the next block, and it goes in succession. So each block continues from the prior block, and therefore a chain of blocks is formed, hence the name blockchain. And blockchain is a type of distributed ledger technology. Um, and cryptocurrency is, let's break that down, right? There's crypto plus currency, right? So crypto is really cryptography, and that's a field of science behind secure communications, right? Basically storing data in a method that people cannot understand unless they have the proper decoding mechanisms, right? And in currency is what we all understand as some sort of medium of exchange, often thought of something as money or something of value that could be traded for something else, right? Cash, everyone knows, is currency, but things like airline mileage points can be as well. It just depends on how broadly you define currency and whether you're talking about specific regulations, which might have even more narrow. So cryptocurrency then is just basically is currency that is based on the principles of cryptography. And then really quickly, I won't get into Bitcoin too much because Gary will get very into it in quite detail. But Bitcoin is basically the king coin. It is the most dominant cryptocurrency, and when people think of cryptocurrencies, they often think of Bitcoin first. In its past, it's been as high as controlling 90% of the market cap of all crypto, and as low as 30%. Currently, it's about of 60%, a little bit in the 60s. And this is the idea that the market value of Bitcoin compared to the market value of all other coins. Now, if you knock out some of the decentralized coins, the ICOs, and what they call shit coins, that dominance could jump up to the 80s. It's really significant because there are thousands of currencies, and for Bitcoin to be so dominant is testament to how strong and reliable it is. And just for figures, Bitcoin's current market cap is about $350 billion, and 24-hour trading volume is reported to be around $25 billion. So, very large, very active coin.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Jor. That was a great explanation. I know we can go into hours and hours of it too. We're going to go with Gary Leland now to expand a little bit more about Bitcoin. Gary, so who created Bitcoin?
Like the person who wrote the white paper and invented it used the name Satoshi Nakamoto. But no one knows if Satoshi Nakamoto is a guy, a girl, a group of people. Some people thought it was Hal Finney, who's passed away, because he did a lot of stuff with digital currency before Bitcoin came out. Some people have said it's Adam Back, who was one of the people who communicated with so-called Satoshi Nakamoto. But nobody really knows who it is. Whoever it is, he left Bitcoin and never returned, basically. And he left with 1 million Bitcoin, which have never been touched, moved, or spent. So if Bitcoin does reach the prices some people estimate it would reach, he would be the richest person on the planet. Whoever he is.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And how do you buy Bitcoin, Gary?
Well, you can buy Bitcoin from people. You can buy it from exchanges. I'm going to give 2 links for Bitcoin purchases from companies I like. I make short links for everything I use. You can go to GaryLeland.com/river. And I believe using that link will give people they won't have any fees for their first $5,000 or $6,000 purchases in Bitcoin. Or you could purchase as little as $10 a month by going to swanbitcoin.com/Gary. And that'll give you $10 worth of free Bitcoin just for signing up. If you just want to get a little bit of it. But you can buy as little as $10 with dollar cost averaging with Swan. There are many places to get Bitcoin, though. I mean, there really are. It's Unchained Cap. There's a ton of places. But I know both of those. I know the people that run them. I'm involved with Swan Bitcoin, so of course I'm going to name it. I know the people at River. They're great people. So I'm just going to name companies that I trust. I buy from those companies.
So, for somebody who doesn't know much about Bitcoin, they get a little scared. They can still just go to Swan Bitcoin and open an account. You can go to
Swan Bitcoin. You can open an account and you can use dollar cost averaging, which with a asset as volatile as Bitcoin, a lot of time that's the best way to do it. And you just say, I'm going to buy $10 a week or $100 a week or $5 a week or $1,000 a week, according to what your budget is. And it just automatically buys for you every week. And then before you know it, you've got you some Bitcoin and a good amount of it. And you can set it at a level that doesn't really affect your budget that much. Maybe you weren't able to buy some beer one night and you got a little Bitcoin instead because you budgeted you decided to buy $10 a week. So that's a great way. I recommend that to everybody who's interested in learning about Bitcoin, really, because I found this really kind of amazing. Once you get a little skin in the game, once you own a little bit of it, and it doesn't matter how little it is, you really start following it and you start reading about it. And I turn a lot of boomers on to Bitcoin who, because I'm a boomer and most of my friends are boomers. And that's what I recommend to my boomer friends is Swan Bitcoin, because they get it and they'll start out with 25 a week or something. And then I talk to them a month later and they go, wow, I saw this growing. I've worked it to 400 a week or 200 a week. So it's amazing starting off with as little as $10, how quickly you start investigating it, learning about it, feeling comfortable with it, and increasing your purchasing power.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And do you think that Bitcoin can be more valuable than gold at some point?
Well, a lot of people do think it can be more valuable than gold. As you can see, here is what's happened this month with Bitcoin alone. I mean, you can see we've had a great month. We've had a great year. It's been the highest moving asset of the year. I think it's been the highest moving asset of the month, the highest moving asset of the decade. Bitcoin has certainly gone in the last 12 years from 5 cents to almost $19,000. But the market cap for Bitcoin is in the billions, where the market cap for gold is in the trillions. So it's got a long ways to go. But there are people, I'm not projecting anything, but there are people who project Bitcoin in the next few years could hit $100,000. If it starts hitting that kind of money, it could start getting up high enough to compete with gold. And right now, a lot of people call it digital gold because they consider it a store of wealth, a hedge against inflation, which gold is normally known as a hedge against inflation. So Bitcoin, a lot of people consider Bitcoin a digital gold. And I think most millennials and Gen Xers would actually rather have Bitcoin than gold bars, which now I don't think I know nothing about gold bars, but gold coins, so it certainly has the potential. I'm not saying it will, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do you safeguard Bitcoin?
Well, you don't want to leave it on the exchange you buy it from. Almost all the Bitcoin that's ever been stolen, whenever you hear about Bitcoin being hacked, it's funny. People go, I hear that Bitcoin's been hacked, though. I don't want that. But it's not Bitcoin that's ever been hacked. It's the exchanges online that people are buying their Bitcoin at. They leave their Bitcoin there. And really, an exchange is not a bank. It doesn't have FDIC insurance. I mean, if it's a honeypot is what it is. And I would think that if you're up to criminal activities and you're wanting to steal Bitcoin, you would go to an exchange where everybody's leaving their Bitcoin, where there's millions and millions of dollars worth of Bitcoins. Now, I say get it off the exchange. I think anyone who's got any common sense and knows anything about Bitcoin is going to say that. And get yourself a wallet. The best is an offline wallet. You can get a Trezor, Trezor.io, or you can get a Cold Card. There are several great offline wallets. So when it's not online, it's in cold storage. And that's what you really want to do. Or you can even do a paper wallet, and print the words on a piece of paper. I think that's how the Winklevoss brothers originally stored all their Bitcoin, was on paper wallets. So just make sure you get it off of an exchange, and don't buy your wallet from Amazon or eBay. Buy it from the manufacturer. You don't want anyone else touching your wallet before you get it. You don't know what they're going to do with it and rewrap it. So buy a wallet, a cold wallet, look that up, and put your Bitcoin on it if you buy any. I know you have to worry if you buy $10 worth. You know what I mean? $20 worth. But if you start getting the thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin, you want to put it in cold storage.
It's great advice. And other than from buying Bitcoin, how can someone make money in the Bitcoin industry?
Well, they can accept Bitcoin on a website if they have a store, online store. Like you could be accepting donations in Bitcoin. I'm sure there's some technicalities with y'all being a nonprofit. But if you're a store, you could go to like opennode.com. If it's a WordPress store, they have an app. You plug in, you just put it on your website, set it up, takes you 5 minutes. You're accepting Bitcoin. When people check out, it'll say the item's $100. You want to pay cash, or not cash, but credit card, or you want to pay with Bitcoin. Or you can go to, I'm going to give you a couple more links here, short links. Go to GaryLeland.com/Lolli, Lolli. Now, this is a plugin for Chrome, and it works like Ebates used to be. I think it's called Radican now or something. And when you buy something online, if they are one of the 1,000 stores that Lolli has partnered with, it'll give you Bitcoin when you buy something there. So that's a cool way to get Bitcoin for free, because it could be a store you're already going to. Like you can go to Kroger's, buy your groceries online, and get free Bitcoin as a rebate. Another great way to do it is the Fold app. You can go to GaryLeland.com/Fold, and you can buy gift cards there. I do all my Amazon purchases through Fold. I'll go buy a Fold gift card for $100, set it up to my Amazon account. I get free Bitcoin as a rebate from Fold, and I just spend the money out of that gift card I got. And I've gotten quite a bit of free Bitcoin from that. So that's a great way to do too, GaryLeland.com/Fold. But both of those are completely free Bitcoin for doing nothing that you don't already do.
That's amazing. I'm going to do that right away.
I do it every day. Actually, on the Fold app on your phone, they have a little wheel you can spin. They want people coming to it, and they're hoping if you come more often, you'll buy gift cards. And they give away, you hit it, and it spins a wheel like a roulette wheel, and they give you free Bitcoin every day, every 24 hours.
That's fantastic. Yes, that's great advice. Thank you so much. And I feel like more companies are going to be following in that too, right?
Oh, I agree completely. I think we're, I really consider Bitcoin, I started my first e-commerce store in 96. Everybody said I was stupid. People really wouldn't buy that much stuff on the internet, but I kind of felt they would. I guess I was right. And I kind of think Bitcoin's like where e-commerce was, but even before 96, maybe like 92 or something. I don't even think we've gotten to 96 yet. So I think we have quite a ways to go in the world of Bitcoin.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, thank you, Gary, for this
Sure.
presentation, and please stick around for the Q&A, because I'm sure there will be questions for you.
Happy to join you guys.
Thanks. We're going to go back to Jor Law, because we want to talk about more about other industries. Jor, I understand this is a contentious point, but what else is there other than Bitcoin?
Look, obviously, I mentioned it earlier, there are thousands of different types of cryptocurrencies, right? And in fact, there are many other types of blockchains as well. And beyond that, there's other types of decentralized ledger technologies, right? So not just blockchain, but different technologies that leverage this concept of decentralized ledgers, right? Some of them are designed to compete against Bitcoin, but many of them, much of blockchain actually just tries to solve different problems unrelated to Bitcoin. And there's many different types of use cases there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And what are some use cases of crypto?
So, we've got some slides here, rather than try to list out every one of them, if go to your favorite search engine and you type out, crypto use cases and things like that, you'll pull up no shortage of infographics. This is one of them that, I found that was a little bit more clear, but there's a ton of them with a lot more information on them, a lot more use cases on them. And there's no shortage. Almost every industry, almost every use case could benefit from it. But there's a couple things that you could think about, right? Like if you believe that digital is better than analog or offline and things like that, and on top of that, you believe that some sort of decentralized mechanism of auditing or trust, more people having, sharing control with more people or having more people verify safety. If you believe digital plus that, then really I'm not aware of any other kind of mass known technology that achieves that, right? It's got to be crypto. So that's where I think crypto and blockchain are pretty compelling. And some of the reasons to think about it is if you're thinking about application use cases that require transparency, well, public blockchains and things like that provide a very good solution for something that demands transparency, right? If you're looking for something that has high integrity, the idea that you have a decentralized control and decentralized method of auditing and monitoring, all publicly available, that lends itself toward high integrity. If you want things to be immutable, not changeable, then relying on a strong chain, and this is where Bitcoin is shows why it's king, right? It's the oldest, most commonly used blockchain. It's been proven to be the safest. Some of the other chains not quite so, right? They may have built it out, and in concept they've built out immutability, but in practice, that's been contested sometimes through just gaming the system and things like that. If you're looking for security, again, Bitcoin and blockchain technology, decentralized ledger technology might be able to provide it. And of course, if you're looking to disintermediate, right, there's this whole industry of middlemen that make money because they're profiting off kind of the misinformation that one party has versus another party has, right? So they come in, and because they're coming in and providing kind of the information arbitrage for everybody, they enjoy nice fees. But if you're talking about transactions which inherently can go between two people, P to P, on a blockchain with high security, high transparency, high integrity, then you may not need that trusted third party intermediary that takes a large fee for doing that now. And in many cases, as you've seen in the headlines, a lot of the people that we count on to do this job, to be the trusted party, a lot of times you find out that they're not so trustworthy, or they've made some mistakes and things like that. You could eliminate a lot of those things through the use of blockchain technology.
That's great.
The other slide I think is helpful as well. Or oh wait, actually no, I think we killed that slide. Never mind.
Yeah, the other one was too messy looking.
It was too small. Yeah.
So what other industries are disrupted by blockchain? If you can give some examples, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. You'll see again if you go in and you type, in a search engine, what industries can use crypto or blockchain. Almost every industry will come up there. There's certain industries where, it'll be less effective, right? Like, getting haircuts on a blockchain, not so great. But, tracking how many haircuts were done on the blockchain and things like that, greater. But, some of the areas that, you see a lot of interesting things being done, in blockchain are payments, especially in micropayments where the payments are such small dollar denominations that the processing fees and expenses are cost prohibitive. So blockchain can provide a solution to that. Of course, you have to be aware. There's quite a number of people that will say, "Oh, it's faster, it's cheaper," but that's not necessarily true. It depends on like how you implement the decentralized ledger technology or the blockchain technology as to whether it truly is faster or cheaper, especially for micropayments. Banking is another big industry that is now starting to look at decentralized ledger technology. I think pretty much every major bank in the world is investigating blockchain or has invested in it or has some department dedicated to it. Public records, public uses, for things like public records for land title, private records, even medical identity, and voting, to get more accurate voting results and things like that. Those are all industries that could be disrupted. Supply chain management is getting disrupted as well. You're seeing a lot of great work from IBM in this case. Walmart actually came out instead. They introduced a blockchain technology where they partnered with IBM, and one of the quotes that they provided is, "With blockchain, research that used to take 7 days can now take as little as 2.2 seconds, tracing contaminated foods to their source." So we're talking about people who are getting poisoned at home because they've had contaminated food, and it's taking someone 7 days to research that. And because they've introduced blockchain technology to help trace things, it's taking them 2.2 seconds sometimes, and that's saving lives, right? That's very disruptive. You're taking a week and distilling it down to seconds. Securities is another huge area. This is an area that I've played a large part in. T0 is a company that I worked with and still consult for, and they are basically trying to make the securities trading market a little bit more efficient through the use of tokenization. And in gaming is great. We'll hear from later another speaker about gaming, but gaming for computer gaming for betting is great. I work with a company called Zen Sports. What they're trying to do is they're trying to disintermediate the bookie, the person that knows who wants to place the bets and who they're betting for. They're connecting everybody, and they're taking quite a large middleman fee for it. But if you can find a trusted way to pair the people up, peer to peer, you can substantially reduce that fee, right? So these are some of the areas where you see industries being disrupted, and the slide that was up there shows some of the players that are doing this, right? And it's not just little companies that are doing this. Obviously, there are a lot of startups that are pursuing this technology, but a huge number of very large and established companies are investigating how blockchain can help their industry.
This is fascinating, and I feel like pretty soon it's just going to be in every industry. So that's amazing. Thank you, Jor. Now we're going to go into regulatory matters with Leslie Katz. Leslie, thank you. Hi. What sort of regulations affect Bitcoin, crypto, or blockchain?
All sorts. I've got an alphabet soup of regulations for everyone. We've got FinCEN, AML, KYC, SEC, CFTC, CFPB, OCC, CEA, IRS. But all of these are the major entities that are really regulating what's happening in this space. We've seen quite a bit coming out of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. And that was in some of the earlier days, and certainly back in 2018 timeframe, we saw a lot of what are called initial coin offerings. And there was, perhaps a bit of a misunderstanding that instead of calling something an IPO, an initial public offering, a lot of these companies came out and offered tokens, and thinking because it wasn't called the public offering, they didn't have to comply with any laws. Well, the SEC stepped in and said, well, wait a minute, we think that you're offering these tokens to potential investors, and these really should come under the rubric of the securities laws. So we heard quite a bit in the, certainly in the 2018 timeframe about a lot of companies, coming out and offering these tokens as a way to raise money to build out their company without really going through the rigors of the traditional disclosures and regulatory process. That's changed quite a bit. You really don't hear as much about the initial coin offerings anymore. there'd been a little bit of a debate as well between the CFTC, the Commodities and Future Trading Commission. What are these tokens? Are they commodities? Are they securities? There's a little bit of both. More recently, there's been some clarity that Bitcoin is viewed as a bit more as a commodity and not as a security, and same with Ethereum. These are two types of cryptocurrencies, and as I think both Joe and Gary mentioned, there's tens of thousands out there, but they all have different properties. But it has been found that really Bitcoin and Ethereum, or Ether, are two that seem more like commodities these days and aren't regulated as securities. But there's an abundance of oversight. The SEC came down on a lot of these companies that did these offerings with both criminal charges, causing the companies to reverse their token sales, refunding sums. In some cases, it was only refunding the purchases of U.S. investors. There's some, again, different regulations depending on where these companies are formed and where the token offerings took place. One of the most important things I think people need to keep in mind when you're looking at cryptocurrencies, and I'll just say some Bitcoin a little bit here, but I think Bitcoin initially got a bad name way back. There was the Silk Road, the famous Silk Road situation where there was a site that was using Bitcoin for all sorts of nefarious activity. And there was a sense that you couldn't trace who actually owned the Bitcoin that was being used, in transactions that, range from buying drugs to buying guns, and certainly, some other things were even worse. So I think that actually slowed down the understanding and adoption of blockchain and Bitcoin initially. A lot of people conflated blockchain and Bitcoin and linked it to these activities. But what's important to remember is that with any of these cryptocurrencies, there still needs to be what's called anti-money laundering, AML, compliance, much like happens in banks, or KYC, know your customer kind of requirements. So that's been a big issue that I think is getting closer and closer to being solved. There's some efforts to embed bioimagery inside some of the cryptocurrencies so that you already know that people have passed this kind of compliance, and it can only be traded amongst those that have met the AML KYC compliance. So there's a lot of things that need to go into regulating of the cryptocurrency and blockchain as well. One of the big problems we have right now is, is it the states that are regulating? Are there federal regulations? There's 180 countries plus out there that also have some of their own regulations. Some ban blockchain, some ban cryptocurrency. Some are now creating their own central banking digital currencies. That's a whole other area we haven't even really explored yet. So there's so many regulations going on. But as companies are looking to start out, I think it's really important to get counsel and look at what regulations they would fall under. A big one is, do they need to comply with money transmitter licenses? And if so, do they need to get it in essentially all 50 states, because all of the states have different requirements and different licensing schemes for money transmitter licenses. In New York, you have the infamous BIT license, which really kept a lot of companies from growing in New York because it was so difficult to obtain the BIT license to operate in New York. And then you have questions. What about taxation? What is the IRS going to say about the cryptocurrencies? So there's a myriad of different regulations, and then you have states trying to figure out what to do. Wyoming was, I think, brilliant in that their legislature only meets for 19 days a year. So back in, I think it was 2018 was the first time they did this. They decided that they wanted to be on the forefront of the blockchain community, and also there was somebody from Wyoming who was very versed in the blockchain space and recognized that Wyoming could essentially be a little bit like a pilot project for the SEC. And so Wyoming passed 6 pieces of legislation, I think the first year, and I forget how many the second year, but in their first 19 days, really embracing blockchain and allowing transactions to take place, allowing companies to register, much like a lot of corporations want to register in Delaware because they know the laws, they know the regulatory framework there. Wyoming created a little bit of regulatory certainty. And we're trying to set this up as some guidance for the SEC. We now have SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, who she hates the moniker crypto mom, but unfortunately it's kind of stuck on her. As she puts it, she's not a mom and she doesn't really feel, necessarily old enough to have that moniker, but everyone refers to her as crypto mom because she understands that you need to create a standard, if you will, or an understanding so that companies know what they're dealing with, know what they need to do to be in compliance with the laws. And she's actually proposed creating something called the safe harbor, which would allow a lot of these companies to innovate without having the fear of being, running afoul of certain regulations. So creating essentially the sandbox that would allow them to build their technology and their tools there before running afoul of certain guidelines so that they could then see what was working. You've got states like California, which created a blockchain working group that came out with 179 pages of suggestions and guidelines on how California can start taking a look at all these different industries and areas that will can be positively affected by blockchain. But again, where do they fall? And it's a new technology in some ways, and some of the old laws absolutely apply, and some of them make no sense whatsoever. So both states and the federal government are going to need to start catching up with the technology. We haven't even gone into what are referred to as smart contracts, which simply put, it's on the sort of Ethereum chain, and without going into great detail, it's essentially saying, if you do this under our criteria, then that will happen. And one of the best analogies I've heard, it's like a vending machine. If you put in $1, you can buy a soft drink. They're called smart contracts, but as a lawyer, it comes nowhere near what we would consider a contract. There's a lot of the terms that would be missing. So if something goes wrong with these contracts, who's at fault? Who's liable for mistakes? If there's a coding error and the contract isn't executed the way somebody expected, but it might still have been in compliance with the software or the coding that was done in that, who's at fault for that? Where does the liability fall? So there's some issues around these so-called smart contracts from a legal perspective. So there's quite a bit of regulation that's still needed, but I think we've come, a long way in a relatively short period of time. I don't want to go into great detail about all the other jurisdictions outside the United States, but there's many of them that have developed a much more robust regulatory scheme, which has attracted a lot of companies to those jurisdictions. One of the ones that certainly comes to mind is Switzerland, where people have a good sense of what they need to do to operate in compliance with the guidelines there. The EU is also coming up with guidelines and ethical frameworks around what's happening in the space. So there's, I've shortcut what's usually several hours of presentation on the legal and regulatory issues surrounding this arena, but it's an exciting time to be part of it. I think we're seeing some of the regulatory certainty coming into more and more focus. There have been the Office of the Control of the Currency has put up some guidelines just in the last couple of months regarding banks being able to hold and reserve funds for stable coins, or permitting custody solutions at the banks that hadn't existed previously. So there's some rapid movement in all the sort of alphabet soup of agencies that I mentioned at the beginning. And it's a fun time to see where we're going to go next.
Yeah, and I know that the regulatory matters are changing every single day. So what you say today will change tomorrow, and And also with the new administration, we're going to have to do another webinar to just go through more of that. Thank you so much, Leslie, for your time. That was great. Now we're going to go to gaming with Ruby Ronwen.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for coming. Ruby, one of the most exciting use industries to leverage blockchain technology is gaming. Can you tell us about what different ways that blockchain technology is or can be used in gaming?
Yeah, definitely. So Jor had mentioned betting, which is a really interesting avenue. Another one I want to mention is true digital ownership of digital assets. And this is something that can be compared to collectibles that have unique serial numbers. And these digital assets live within the game. So you can use them in the game or you can even take them out. And they can be on a third-party marketplace like OpenSea. And it can have a completely separate life. You can see on OpenSea like how much it's sold for, who's bought it. CryptoKitties is famous for it. We have our own asset that was made a few years ago called it's a ship called a Sigma Battle Cruiser, and it sold for the equivalent of $25,000. And that person had later resold it. I think within this year actually. They later resold it for $55,000. And
Wow.
it's insane, but it shows just how scarce these items are and how that ship, it lives within our game and you can play it, you can travel space in it, or you can also take it out and you have true ownership of this item. And I think that's one of the innovative ways that we've seen blockchain and gaming come together.
That's so fascinating. And I heard it's the millennials and the Gen Zers that are doing it mostly too. And it's just, I wish I had that when I was younger and had time to play video games.
We have some boomers as well.
I'm not a boomer, but I'm in the middle. Yes, definitely. So you work at a company that leverage blockchain technology. What do you guys do?
So yeah, we marry the two, and we have two titles that showcase this. We have MLB Champions, which are digital collectibles, and it's officially licensed by MLB and by MLB Players Association. And we have CSC, like as mentioned, it's a space MMO. Players can travel to different star systems, they can mine for resources, and they can craft from those resources. And what they craft is actually becomes a digital asset itself. So a player can spend months mining for a resource, getting the crafting happening, and they can have this one unique item. And they can choose to put it up in our in-game marketplace, which uses hard and soft currency, or they can take it out, mint it on the blockchain, and they can sell it on, like had mentioned, OpenSea, and they can set the price for it. And it's kind of goes back to that idea of true digital ownership, and it's not something many games offer at all. You can buy a game, but you don't actually like own a sword that comes in the game. But with ours, you actually own these items. And say our game disappears in 20 years, hope it doesn't. Those items will persist. They will continue to live on the blockchain, and it will have a completely separate life, and people can choose to own them and do what they want with them. And it kind of just goes back into that idea of collectibles. And at Lucid Sight, we've always kind of been focused on frontier gaming. Years and years ago, we were doing some early VR stuff, and then we saw blockchain and saw the potential of it, and it's something that we've been utilizing the last few years.
That's great. That's great. And I understand you use Ethereum. And we learned earlier that there are thousands of coins out there and countless chains. Why Ethereum? And are you looking at any other chains beyond Ethereum, and why?
So we currently are not looking at any other chains, and the why of that kind of goes into why we use Ethereum and why other games like CryptoKitties and Gods Unchained also use Ethereum. And it's because we utilize what's called an ERC 721 token. These are just a part of the Ethereum ecosystem, and they are non-fungible tokens, also known as NFTs. So those game items I had mentioned earlier are NFTs, and those are unique, they're scarce, and they're very secure through the Ethereum blockchain. And that kind of answers why we stick with Ethereum.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. So now we have Q&A. We have some questions, and let me see here. We're gonna bring all the speakers up. Okay, so this is for Gary. What do you think the trend is in terms of demographics of people investing in Bitcoin?
Well, I think the trend was much younger, but now it's starting to move back in. You've got the boomers who are starting to get comfortable with it, and they have large assets to put into it. But I'd say it's pretty mixed right now. I don't think it's just a young man's game anymore, though.
Right. I heard, there are a lot of boomers interested. We've been talking a lot about boomers, and they have so much wealth. So even if they're not the majority, whatever they put into it is just going to be great for the industry.
Yeah, if they put in just 1%. I mean, it's a lot of money.
A lot of money. Okay, next question. Okay, do you see, for all the panelists or anyone, do you see Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation?
I don't want to hog up the Bitcoin questions, so I'll sit back. Well, since no one's answering it, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I put a considerable amount of my assets into Bitcoin.
Well,
I was going to say, I think
ahead.
you've seen that happen with, when the pandemic hit and we saw a little downturn initially in the stock market and other areas that, Bitcoin, that's when Bitcoin really took off, that people recognized that had, a global stability in a way that a lot of these other areas didn't. So I think people definitely viewed Bitcoin as a hedge, and that's, a large measure of why you're seeing some of the growth in value.
Yeah, I think if you look at the design of Bitcoin, where you have a fixed supply of Bitcoin and increasing demand, if you assume that, demand increases yet supply stays the same, that provides one set of economics that's very different from, the economics you see of money supply around the world today. Especially given COVID and kind of the international markets, the M2 money supply in the US and, the money supply around the world, countries have just been printing money in order to kind of, fund expenses and things like that. These have the effect of devaluing currency. And in fact, if you look at, almost all currencies and you look at them over a long period of time, they devalue. And if you look at them and you compare, kind of the devaluation, even in the last decade, of US dollar to itself and Bitcoin against itself, you find, very different results. So, I'm not an investment advisor, of course, but what is interesting is that if you start reading the news, one of the reasons for Bitcoin's recent surge is that very smart folks, some of the world's best traders, some of the world's most famous investors, have now kind of pointed to the fact that, hey, something's not right. Money is not safe. We probably have to do something else. And you're getting very established wealth management firms coming out and saying, hey, Bitcoin should be a part of your portfolio. Some of them say 1 to 3%. Some of them say 10%. Some of them say a lot more than 10%. And in fact, you get some very smart people putting in like much larger numbers of their own personal wealth in there. You get a lot of well-respected funds that have submitted filing requests to be able to move and make investments into Bitcoin. And you see public companies that are changing their treasury dollars from US dollar to Bitcoin, as a hedge mainly against what's happening.
And you have people like Paul Tudor Jones, who says that Bitcoin should be higher than what it is for what it can do. And I think people like that, when those investors come in that Dora's talking about, that actually gives more credibility, builds more credibility for the boomers who know who these financial investors are and have followed their advice before for their assets. And so if they're putting money into it, that makes them feel a little more comfortable and they start putting money into it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. What's the best resource for beginners to learn more about blockchain and Bitcoin, et cetera? I know, Gary Leland, you have a website that has a lot of info. Does anyone else have any other resource ideas?
Well, if someone's interested in finding out, I would recommend the one book that I recommend. I think is one of the best books out there is by Saifedean Ammous called The Bitcoin Standard. And in this book, it's an audio and print. And in this book, Saifedean goes from the time that shells were used as money all the way into blockchain, all the way into cryptocurrency. So it's quite an involved book. But it really gives you an understanding of money, which I think you have to understand Bitcoin. And it's more say about money and Bitcoin. So I'll let someone else go into the blockchain answer for that. But that's a book I would recommend.
Gary, we're both advisors to Swan. I think one of the co-founders, or they have a Bitcoin book as well, and I think it's free at the moment. I think they're giving out the digital version of that free.
Yes, it's Building Bitcoin. Is that correct? Inventing Bitcoin.
Yes, Inventing
Bitcoin, and that's free. You can get a free digital copy on the website at Swan. You're correct. I forgot about that, and that's a great book. Actually, that's a better first book, I think, if you want to find out about Bitcoin. Go into that and then roll into Saifedean's book. And then Jenny Song has a great Bitcoin book, too. I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm blank on that at the moment.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, if you think of it, you could let us know. And this one's for Ruby. Let's see. How does someone actually start playing a blockchain game?
So we do a pretty good way of this because for our game, we actually don't even require you to have an ETH address. We have an engine that works in between called Scarcity Engine. So someone who's not interested doesn't always have to be a part of it. But if you want to, something for us is we utilize a Chrome extension called MetaMask. And through MetaMask, you can help create a address. It'll also take you over to Coinbase, and you can purchase some ETH through there, and then have it attached to MetaMask. And within our website, you can make purchases of some assets, or you can start up the game. You can purchase from OpenSea. There's a lot of different avenues actually for it. But I think one important thing, though, is using the extension MetaMask. It's very helpful for it. It'll hold your assets as well. You just need to have an address attached to it.
Awesome. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just do want to clarify since, MetaMask, is one mechanism to use, Ethereum chain things. And if you're looking at purely Bitcoin, you wouldn't be using MetaMask.
Yeah, this is Ethereum only.
Got it. Thank you. This one's probably for Leslie. Is the incoming administration seen as positive or negative for crypto?
I think there's a sense that it's being seen as positive. There's, the Biden campaign had their, policy teams put in place, and there was quite a big focus on innovation and emerging technologies. I think, the outgoing administration was starting to recognize, although there had been some denunciation of cryptocurrency early on, that there'd been a movement towards recognizing that cryptocurrency and blockchain could have a lot of positive impact. I think the Biden administration is going to pick up on that. They brought in Gary Gensler to head the financial policy transition, and he's been a proponent of Bitcoin and blockchain. And I think that was seen as a sign of a positive movement there. But I also think, as was mentioned, I think by all the speakers, the applications that are the potential for all the different applications are really being recognized by government now. And so utilizing blockchain for transactions, and my personal feeling is we're looking at how do you distribute millions of, hundreds of millions of vaccinations with respect to COVID, blockchain is a brilliant way of tracking and facilitating those kind of efforts. But I think the incoming administration, I think, is being viewed positively. I know that the people that they'd assembled as part of the innovation policy team, I guess I can now say I was part of that, do support blockchain and cryptocurrency, and are just utilizing, are looking at ways of it being utilized in government, and then also providing the proper regulatory framework to allow the innovation to grow at the same time as protecting consumers. Those are really the key factors. You want to allow for this innovation, but you also want to protect the consumers. And I think there's that recognition in the administration, incoming administration.
Thank you, Leslie. What is the liquidity of crypto for anyone?
Wait, as far as selling your Bitcoin? Is that what we're asking?
Probably, yes. This is a question, but probably talking about selling.
I don't think it's that hard. You just go to an exchange, find you an exchange and go to it and upload your Bitcoin there and sell it. It's just like selling your stock online. It's not a whole bunch difference as far as my experience.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it depends on what type of crypto you're holding. If you're holding on to one of those shit coins, you may have limited liquidity. If you're holding on to kind of the more actively used ones like Ethereum or Bitcoin, there's many avenues for liquidity. There's liquidity through kind of centralized exchanges. There's liquidity through kind of decentralized platforms. And the liquidity is, I would say, far larger than, like, for example, the stock market, right? Like the global liquidity of Bitcoin, the 24-hour volume, I think, surpasses what the 24-hour volume of NASDAQ would be. I'm not sure about that, but I'd be willing to bet money even being unsure.
And you can always just use localbitcoins.com, sell it locally to somebody.
But also one of the changes over the last, couple of years is really the secondary trading market and allowing for the growth of a secondary trading market, not so much in the main coins, but in some of these smaller and lesser known cryptocurrencies. That's something that I think is going to have the capability of more liquidity when you have a more robust secondary trading market. And I think T0 was mentioned earlier as an example of that. And we're seeing more and more. And, you've got companies like Securitize that are using blockchain for tracking and focusing on securities too. So there's a lot of, other opportunities that are growing in the space that I think will create more liquidity in this area.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The crypto is so liquid that its technology is being used to make other things that are normally illiquid more liquid.
Thank you. Next question. We've heard that crypto is used for crime. Is that true?
Well, I think as mentioned earlier, the first really use of crypto or Bitcoin in a retail marketplace was Silk Road, which proved that it could be used as a currency, but it was a criminal site that sold a lot of illegal products. I'm not going to say it was a legal site, but it sold a lot of illegal products. But I think we've evolved quite a bit from those days. And now I think probably there's more crime done with US dollar bills than there is Bitcoin. But I can see where that would be a stigma that was still in some people's minds from the early days of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think it's something we have to fix. Certainly, it's used for crime. Certainly, there's fraud in crypto, there's fraud in Bitcoin. That's true of pretty much any currency. And certainly, if you want to talk about the most guilty currency, that would be probably the US dollar, right? But if you kind of look at the rhetoric of late, you'll find that actually government officials love it when people use crypto to commit crime because it makes tracking them so much easier. Once you find a transaction, you can trace it back through much more easily. And you find that a lot of criminals that are using crypto are getting in trouble.
I think earlier in the year, one of the largest pedophilia rings ever was busted because they were charging Bitcoin, and they tracked Bitcoin back to Coinbase and found out whose account it was, and they were able to take down the whole ring because it was Bitcoin. So yeah, I have to agree with Jorah. I think from what I always see, they like Bitcoin because they can find out who owns it and they can track it down somewhere.
There was to that point, I completely agree with all the remarks. And then I think one thing to think about is there was a sense early on that you couldn't trace Bitcoin or these transactions, but the reality is they can be traced, and that was a bit of a misunderstanding. And to the point being made that it is possible to track down some of these illegal transactions. Also, I think, as I was talking about earlier, with more and more focus on the anti-money laundering and know your customer requirements for all of the companies that are launching their cryptocurrencies. I think that also changes that dynamic. And again, it's just like, as we said, using dollars is, criminals use that too. I mean, criminals are going to do what they're going to do, and they'll probably find ways in whatever transactions there are, but I don't think you're really seeing it as much anymore in the Bitcoin space. At least, certainly not the way it was when it first came out with Silk Road.
I think
that's been a big hurdle the industry's had to overcome, that misunderstanding and misnomer. And I think we've moved quite a ways away from that now, but the public needs to recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Ruby,
did you have something?
I was saying, the fact that we see so many bigger companies utilizing blockchain ETH just shows how much we've come away from that stigma. Like, you had the presentation of all those companies using it. Like, we ourselves have, us working with MLB, with CBS, we've really come a long way from that stigma. And like Jor also mentioned, USD is guilty of it as well, of that utilization of crime.
Well, thank you so much. We are at 1 o'clock. So appreciate the speakers, all of you today. Leslie Katz, Jor Law, Gary Leland, and Ruby Ronruin. I know you're all very, very busy. So thank you so much. I want to thank our sponsors, Clark Hill PLC, Andrade Gonzalez LLP, Corpavera Lee, and Dominguez LLP. I want to thank Cynthia Martinez and Christina Lozado from the YWCA Pasadena for all the behind the scenes work. Thank you all for watching. We will be sharing this webinar on our social media, which is Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We also tweet, but the video will be shared on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So please follow us at YWCA Pasadena and share. Our text to donate option will still be active for a while, so you can donate anytime. That's texting YW blockchain to 41411. Thank you so much for joining today. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye.